Welcome to the stage, co-founder and managing partner of O1 Advisors, Dick Costolo, and founder, serial entrepreneur, investor, and creator, Brad Keywell.
I feel like doing a fireside chat in an opera house is like underwhelming. One of us should do like a Puccini aria or something. Vincero. That's pretty good.
I'm not going to take the same risk as Dick just took. So
I sound great from up
you
here.
really do. It's a good vibration. Okay, we're here to talk about something that's really not that big of a deal and really doesn't matter that much, AI. So this is probably the most important thing that's ever happened in our lifetimes. And I want to start by framing what it is at a remedial sense. I think it's important to understand really what's happening because theoretically, all of technology has been built off of the idea and dependent on the idea of a database. And a database is organized in rows and columns, and in each row and column is a piece of data, and there's been a way to tag that data. And all of the innovation before large language models and the like have been dependent upon innovative ways to search the rows and the columns and the tags. End of story. So Oracle is a way to search rows, columns, and tags, et cetera, et cetera. And fundamentally what's happened, just to level set this, is an amazing idea came about taking every word that's in every row and every column and making it dynamic. So every word can learn from every other word, and that's what's happening right now, is we're witnessing the innovation that comes from that idea. So that's one way to look at framing the picture. And I go to you, Dick. With this framework we're going to have today, I'm going to interview Dick, and we're just going to talk about stuff, but I'll keep it going. But the question is, what is the big picture happening right now from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this all started in 2017, really, with the paper attention is all you need, which introduced the transformer model that all these LLMs are based on. That really created this quantum leap and speed of execution toward artificial general intelligence. The big picture is we're probably, depending on who you want to ask, 3 to 5 years away from true artificial general intelligence. AGI being the machine is just as smart as or smarter as humans on any particular question, text, reasoning, et cetera. And then we're probably not that far away after that from artificial superintelligence. So the really big picture is you've got companies in the US and organizations/companies in China racing each other toward AGI, with OpenAI probably being the furthest ahead in the US, although these models continuously displace each other as to who's in the lead. And DeepMind, of course, has been in the news from China.
And how do you think about speed? Because I think you and I, I've known you for 20 years, right? We've been in the trenches, and you witness speed, and you can't believe it. And all of a sudden, you can't believe that you couldn't believe it. I mean, what's going on now?
Speed is probably people always talk about technology moats in investing, and what's their moat? What's the thing that prevents someone from catching up to them? In the AI space, speed is the only moat. It really is. And so the interesting challenge, and I guess this is all framework for thinking about how to invest in the space, and then also thinking about the good and bad things that could happen to society from all this, is one of the core parts of AI theory, if you will, is alignment. And alignment is, let's make sure the AI is doing things that are aligned with human intentions and beliefs and goals, right? And so let's make sure the AI doesn't get out of the guardrails and do something it shouldn't have done that's not aligned with the way we think about our goals as humans. Well, the big challenge is, in the race to win, and winning is defined as, well, we have to beat China, and then China, they're like, well, we have to beat the US. Some of the alignment issues are falling by the wayside. Some of the alignment issues and concerns and safety are falling by the wayside in an effort to win and be first. Because if we don't get there and they beat us, they can take out our power grid, and on and on, on and on and on. And I think so there are enormous implications for getting to AGI and not having an alignment, and with all sorts of catastrophic consequences as well. But speed is, and the train has left the station on that. There are companies that are like, well, OpenAI needs to slow down, and obviously a bunch of executives have left the company and saying, we're not focused enough on safety. But the train has really left the station on that front, and it's all about getting there first.
And I want to get to alignment when we talk about the human consequences of what's going on. I want to first start with pattern recognition. okay? Because you and I have both been starting companies and investing in companies for 30 years. Social media had a purpose, and then it had a consequence.
Yeah.
So I'd say the purpose was to connect us. The consequence.
Yeah, well, I'm smiling because a lot of and the reason I mentioned alignment earlier is a lot of the biggest proponents of AI. I mean, Reid Hoffman, who's a friend of mine and the founder of LinkedIn, of course. Reid will get on stage and talk about how great he was on the board of OpenAI for a while and talk about how great AI is, and it really shouldn't worry about your kids going and doing their homework on it because it's just going to help them learn faster. And when I talked to him after one of his conferences, and I was like, dude, were you were you around for what just happened in social media? We had 2009, 2010, we're connecting the world, we're giving the smallest voices, a voice in the world, and by 2016 we were, actually people are using it to try to control our elections and outcomes of elections, and misinformation and abuse, and causing people to commit suicide because of being abused on social media. So the implications and consequences of technology are not always, and are almost rarely ever, only good.
Okay, so let's go back even further. The purpose of technology in general is to make us humans better in some way.
Yeah.
I suppose there is some technology whose purpose is to destroy and ruin, but let's just stick with, for this conversation, because we're investors. So if the purpose, we're optimists as investors, of course, and what we're investing in
you
is...
can be both an optimist and a realist,
Yeah, of course. So, but technology in general, the purpose has been to advance humanity.
Yeah.
The consequence, generally speaking, what you say is what, of technology?
I think the consequence has been a bit of a dumbing down of, all humans. So I'm going to go get scientific for 2 seconds. All humans, let's say we burn, if we're not working out, we burn 2,000 calories a day. 30% of that is just your brain. So literally 30% of the calories you burn sitting around all day are just your brain. So evolutionarily, we're trained to do cognitive offloading, meaning I gotta get something else to do some of the work my brain would otherwise be doing because it's taking up too much energy, literally. So using a calculator is cognitive offloading, right? I don't want to calculate 20% of the bill. I'm just going to type it into the calculator and do it. And you see, and that causes people to, be less and less capable at doing simple things like calculating 20% of a bill. Yeah. Well, to the extent you can now go to ChatGPT and cognitive offload everything, so it's got a tremendous dumbing down.
So the purpose of AI is, again, to make us better.
And it will make us way more productive. It's going to make us a lot more productive. We're just going to be reliant on it.
So what I think is, when I think about the meta question, I think about what it takes for a human being to experience something making their lives easier.
Right.
And what we're used to is some time to think, to resist, to bureaucratize as a way of resistance. An organization can bureaucratize itself to slow it down technology's pace.
Right.
Here we are where the speed is such that I think all of us are feeling a bit of overwhelm because we're still human. How do you think about that problem or that reality?
It's a great question. I mean, I'll actually address the bureaucratization piece first in the interest and thesis around investing in the space. I think, traditionally when you look at a new wave of technology, you look at the incumbents in technology and you think, well, they've got leverage in the space and they're going to be able to out-innovate. And since AI is so specifically expensive, you've got to spend money on compute and it's quite expensive, you would think that the Apples and the Googles of the world would be in the leadership position to go affect change here, particularly because the authors of the Transformer paper were Google employees. And yet, Apple and Google, I like to say they ship their org chart. Like the products, like you can see the org chart in the product, which is a very, very bad thing. And so as a result, you've got these AI-first companies that have emerged that are just much, much, much faster in all respects, not just OpenAI versus Google, for example, but You think about things like Siri on iOS. It's useless compared to any of the emergent, voice-to-text apps like Voice Notes or Granola, the note taker, et cetera, et cetera. So this will be a space where the Gen AI from the bottom up companies, from the ground up as Gen AI, will be able to move a lot more quickly and innovate more rapidly and win versus the incumbents, not just in the general tech space like Apple and Google versus the OpenAIs of the world, but in industry verticals. So if you think about accounting firms or legal law firms or even companies like Palantir. Okay, Palantir was started 15 years ago and it wasn't Gen AI based. There are emergent companies now that are AI first with very, very small teams that are taking on Palantir and are incredibly well funded. And I think that you'll see more and more of that industries being entirely reframed by companies that are created from the ground up Gen AI.
I think what's interesting philosophically is this is probably the first time where we can't escape that technology is happening to us.
Yeah.
When there's bureaucracy in organizations, you can get the feeling, even though it might not be true, that it's happening by you because you can have some agency in pacing it and slowing it down, right? Because when I had built companies in the enterprise space, the people that work in the companies that we are quote unquote disrupting are the barrier. And I started to realize it's because they're exercising their agency as humans, which is, I'll tell you when we're ready to change. I'll tell you where we're going to change first. And now we're in a position or in a state of affairs where for all of us people, whether we work in a company or whether we're side hustlers or whatever it is, technology is happening to us. And I don't think there's a framework for us to think about that.
No, I agree with that. And again, as you think about, I'll talk a little bit about investing and then a little bit about the potentially negative consequences, because I don't think we've done that enough in technology. Every industry vertical that you can imagine is going to be reimagined from Gen AI from the ground up. So right now, there are multiple venture firms who are investing in going out and buying small to medium-sized accounting firms, and they're going to replace the accountants with AI. Now, today, the LLMs are not the models are not great at math, but these venture firms are knowing they will become great at math, are getting ahead of that, and they're buying these firms, and they're going to replace the people with AI. That's going to happen in legal. They're going to be ground-up law firms. That's going to happen in healthcare.
General Catalyst bought a hospital system to own a hospital system to then replace the back end of it, right?
So the consequence is going to be that I think that, people and government aren't, so there's an investment opportunity. You can pick any industry vertical and go attack that, redo it from the ground up with Gen AI with far fewer people, so you can charge a lot less and still make greater margins. And that will work in every industry. The consequence is going to be you're going to have an evisceration of the white-collar class. And I don't think people are talking about that enough. That's going to lead to, an enormous sense of, fear of safety, fear of my job. It's going to lead to political radicalization because you'll end up having the very, very wealthy and the when you get rid of the rungs on the ladder of the corporate ladder and you don't have I can get this and then promoted to that and then promoted to president. There's the CEO and a few people and not many others.
Yeah.
You just have this. You're going to have political radicalization. I don't think that politicians in the country or the technologists are talking about this enough.
And therefore, what? Do you have any ideas about that? Because I look at it and I say, I'm not sure there's any clear idea yet. Now, granted, every time, when I read history, the stirrup on the saddle on the horse was radical technology that enabled warfare because it gave humans leverage to ride a horse. So start there. Every ounce of technology development that's happened, humans have found a way to not be eviscerated, to not be sitting looking at a wall all day, right? And so now, I suppose, it's just amplified. So what do you see happening?
I think that it's incumbent upon the industry, and I mean the AI industry and the leaders in AI in the industry. And Dario from Anthropic has been, to his credit, has been super vocal about this. He's like, hey, we're going to lose millions of jobs. We need to be talking about what to do here. And I think it needs to lead to something like universal basic income, where there's just the government is paying people even though they're not working, and the country at large is far more productive. Like GDP could go up with mass, but also have mass unemployment. And so I think that's a core component to investing in this space. Ethically, I think is going to have to become some of these firms that are thinking about what are we going to be able to give back to the government to take care of these people who are losing their jobs. The challenge in the United States is it's a particularly bad country for something like UBI because, or poorly aligned country, if you will, for UBI, because you've got both a, free markets above all else way of thinking about capitalism, which has gotten us this far and it's been great, but also just an immense general distrust of the government being in charge of stuff.
Yeah, I was talking to Dan Gilbert yesterday about the collaboration of private industry and government and the role of an entrepreneur in a city. And here we're talking about the role of entrepreneur in society. And that's not created yet. This is a new paradigm. We collectively are going to have to figure out how it is that some of these entrepreneurial leaders or someone collaborates with government, because government alone, I don't believe, is going to be able to figure this out on itself.
It has to be the
I don't know how it's going to happen. I believe that it has to happen.
You're 100% correct. And almost always, the technologists in charge at the time are not ready for the obligation that's in front of them. I'll give you an example from Twitter. So I'm running Twitter, and my assistant comes into the office one day when I have a meeting with my staff and says hey, she's whispering. I remember she's whispering, and then later on I was like, why are you whispering that? Anyway, she goes, hey, the White House is on the phone. And I was like, how do you know? How do you know? Anyone can call and say they're the White House. And he's like, no, I think it's Valerie Jarrett, Obama's chief of staff. And I was like, again, how do you you should just anyone can call. Anyway, I answer the phone. I'm like, and I born and raised in Detroit. I got the Midwest upbringing. I'm running this tech company. I'm like, what did I do? I was like, I didn't do anything. What do they want me for? And literally, my first thought was, I didn't do anything. And I got on the phone. I'm like, hello? And she's like, hey, the president would love to have you come and talk to him, this week in the Roosevelt Room about, misinformation and Snowden had just, leaked all that information. And we need to understand how terrorists are using your platform. Can you be in the Roosevelt Room on Friday? And I was like, yes. But again, even though this stuff was happening on the platform, the people in charge of these companies, present company included, you're not
focused on policy.
About that. Yeah,
right.
But in the AI world, all of these entrepreneurs and technologists, and again, to Dario's credit, he is, but I don't think any of them are enough, have to be focused on this, or it's going to be horrible.
Yeah, if anything, all of our obligations, whether it's founder, part of a company as a team member, investor, board member, everything is magnified. Everyone what we do matters more than ever. I want to stick on Twitter for a second and keep jumping around and go back to the idea of why is it that an Apple is not dominant in AI? And what I'm seeing is the capacity of 1, 3, 5, maybe 20 people to fundamentally outcompete and outcreate a 2,000 person company. And it goes back to my core idea, which I often talk about. I'm like, one person with a great idea is unbelievable. 2, it's a little political, trying to navigate between those 2 people. How do you figure out what idea you're going to work on? 3, you're totally screwed. The politics of a meeting of 3 people, how are you going to make a decision, gets hard, and keep adding exponentially. So 2,000 people, wow, is that hard to navigate? 10, 2, 50, a lot easier. And here we are watching Apple be outflanked. How do you think about that?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's a reason Apple was so successful when Steve Jobs returned, because he just told people what, he decided. He would go around the room and ask, and then would say, do this. Eddie Q famously tells the story of when he first met Steve Jobs. He goes, they were working on the iPod, and they're in a marketing meeting, and this is actually. It actually, interestingly, really informs how to think about, again, investing in this space. In this meeting, Eddie Q runs all marketing for Apple, and did under Steve as well. In his first meeting ever with Steve, he's in the room and they're talking about marketing the iPod, and the CMO is presenting something to Steve, and Eddie says something in the meeting that disagrees with what the speaker's saying, and Steve looks at him and goes, "Hey, shut up." And then the speaker keeps talking, and 20 minutes later, she comes to some conclusion that that Eddie realizes is, well, it's based on this wrong slide she's got earlier in the deck. And he says, yeah, but slide 10 is wrong, so this is really, and Steve looks at him and goes, "Hey, I thought I told you to shut the fuck up." And so you had a company where the guy who in charge may be crazy, but he's a lone voice and in charge, and he's going to do things the way he wants to do them. And of course, the way that meeting finally ends is Eddie says something at the end of the meeting that is contrarian but agrees with Steve against the opposition of everyone else in the room. And Steve goes, "Finally, someone in this room thinking for themselves." Anyway, but to your point, these AI companies that have a visionary founder that doesn't have to deal with any legacy technology and can use these models that are already capable of writing 90% of the code you need to go forward are going to beat any incumbent in the space, irrespective of how good that incumbent's technology team is, because they've got existing technology, which is baggage, and they have to support that while trying to move into this new age.
Yeah, we're talking about a friend of ours runs Uber, and 2 years ago, last year, 30% less coders. This year, I think order of magnitude is much greater than that. So it's happening before our eyes. The descaling of some of these large organizations attempting to create agility where there wasn't before. I'm going to get to investing in one more second. U.S. versus China. It's worth talking about for a couple minutes. So is this peacetime creation of AI? Is this a peacetime race, or is this a wartime race? Is AI being created to help us be more efficient, or is it really at fundamental core right now a tool that is of existential concern, which might explain why it's existentially important to each country? How do you think about it?
I mean, the short answer is it's both, but I think if you really, the more complicated answer is it's 100% a race to be first, because the defense of the country, the sovereign defense of the country is going to benefit the winner significantly. Like if you lose and the other AI can take out your electricity grid or take down your AI, and you can imagine how the compounding problems that occurred there, which is again goes back to means that both sides, both the Chinese and the American companies, are racing to do this without considering alignment enough, which is again
alignment with human values, or human
values. So
or
you're
with
just
a societal system of freedom versus whatever it is.
Yeah. It can only have bad consequences.
Yeah, and I would say one of the issues that is an investable thesis for some is our defense industrial infrastructure moves slowly, and authoritarianism moves quickly. And so we have to adapt how we buy, think, enact, implement technology as a defense or an offense. We have to think about that differently, which is, we're watching it happen. We're watching how tricky it is.
Yeah, it's why, again, defense is no different than any of the other industries I mentioned: accounting, legal, energy, healthcare. And why you have companies like Anduril, which are, built from the ground up very, very recently by Palmer and others, which are going to outflank and outpace the Raytheons and the others of the world.
What's interesting is Anduril is taking commoditized hardware and adding interesting software to it to make it a weapon, make it a defense shield. And that idea of it's not the hardware. In the old days, you'd build a fancy plane for 10 years. That was your ultimate defense, offense. Now it's build a non-fancy plane that has fancy capabilities. Just take a commoditized plane. I think it changes also the capital required to defend a country or be on offense also.
Yeah. When you think about investing in any of these spaces, and I've talked about these verticals, different industry verticals. The other interesting that's happening in the investing space is all in the model areas. There are obviously the LLMs that we know about, Anthropic and OpenAI and Cohere and others. And then there are video models, and there are dozens of video models. And like the LLMs, they're constantly leapfrogging and displacing each other. And then there are audio models. And so it seems on an investment axis that those will all become commoditized, because if I'm a business and I'm using a model on the back end and a new one comes along and is better, I'm just making an API call, an application call to that model on the back, to Anthropic on the back end, and I can change that to be an API call to Gemini or Cohere or whatever, with a flick of a switch. So those are likely, even though there are dozens of these companies in all areas and lots of them raise tons of money, those are likely bad places to invest, because they're going to be commoditized and the pricing will be depressed. The interesting emergent space in video and media and filmmaking and advertising making, et cetera, are these companies that are basically building workflow automation for a layer, if you will, above the models that allow you to, hey, take your audio clip from here and use the Luna video model and runway for this, and orchestrate them all to make this, take this 2D image and make a 3D Coca-Cola ad. It'll be those companies, and they're really just starting. And again, if there are investors in the room who are interested in pouring money into this space, those workflow automation tools that lay above these models are going to be enormously valuable, probably where most of the value accrues, because they're going to be the thing the customer interfaces with, and they're really just getting going.
And I want to go deep on that, but one last note: when one thinks about the amount of money going into some of these foundational model companies, I experienced friends of mine trying to understand how. This is an outrageous amount of capital at outrageous valuations. So capital's going in $1 billion to buy 3% of a company, 8% of a company. Where's this money coming from? And I think if all of that $1 billion was our own money, if each of us had to actually put our own money in, it would be different. I think that there are huge allocators of capital, that we have retirement funds that we've all paid into, and they have the mandate, if you will, to put, let's say, 5% of the money that we've given them into high growth stuff. They have so much money now that has been entrusted with them, and they have to allocate it to something. And to find investments that are worthy of lots of investment, well, you'd say, well, here's a good space because they need $1 billion. There's going to be a lot of losers. There's going to be a lot of $1 billion zeros.
Of course.
Of $1 billion of, forget valuation, the capital, $1 billion in, zero.
Yeah, in fact, you see that, yes, 100%. Now there are two sides of this coin, right? There are people who said it was crazy to put $1 billion into OpenAI at a $30 billion valuation, and here we have Masa and SoftBank now talking about funding it at $350 billion valuation. So it's a 10x from the idiots who put in at $30 billion. And if you think about the potential for OpenAI now having acquired Johnny Ive's company, there will be a new device that comes out that won't be the phone or the laptop. It probably looks something like a key fob or something that's in some pocket, and you'll talk to it, and it's your interface to the AI. Apple ships their org chart now. It'll be someone else who ships something like that. And if you're OpenAI and you've got the winning model and the physical interface, what is that, a $2 trillion, $3 trillion company? So one side of this is, yes, some of these people are going to make a lot of money.
Right.
However, it's also the case that in technology, it's frequently first mover. We talk about first mover advantage. Yeah. And in AI, it's not necessarily been the case that the first mover is the winner. In the coding copilots, for example, there was a company, Magic.dev, that came out and they showed people their demo and got 9 figures of funding from multiple folks. Raised something like $200-300 million. And then there was Cognition that came out with Devin, and again, this is an amazing coding copilot, and raised hundreds of millions of dollars. And then 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th, along comes Cursor, and Cursor's now pretty much run the table. And we could argue about this, but I declare it. You could kind of declare it the winner. So again, going back to the investing space, there is the old hey, first mover, get in there and place your bet on this person or this company is not necessarily the right strategy here. The right strategy here in AI is a little bit more, let's sit back and see who gets momentum with customers, because then everyone will be like, well, these guys love using X and I'm going to use that. And these companies can get up and running so quickly, there's some advantage here to sitting back a little bit. I know Elad Gil, who's just a remarkable investor and has been for years and worked with me at Twitter way back when. Elad put a bunch of money into one of the coding co-pilots that I think, and now he realizes, I was too early. And so he sat back in the doctor's script, listening in the doctor's office, listening to the conversation, and then transcribing the notes. He sat back, waited for a winner to emerge there, and invested in that one. And I think that's going to be a winning strategy in these AI verticals.
If we say that even though this is a new tale being told, that there are still, this is a tale as old as time, stories going on, right? One of the, this is tale as old as time would be the best human interface, the best user interface generally will create early adoption, and human habits don't die easily. So there's still cognitive biases that us humans all have. So people start using OpenAI and it's a habit now. And to break a habit to convince you to break a habit is a lot harder than you to continue doing it. So how does that inform, first of all, do you agree or disagree? And then how does that inform your investment thesis about what you're actually putting money into now?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So A, I agree with that. Second, when we see things that are the market for this is literally every person that works in this particular industry. B, 5 years from now, are we going to look back and go, how were people getting by without this? And C, is it like DFS, dead fucking simple? Like, those are great investments. I'll give you an example of one. Xero is a company that's essentially, I just mentioned recording conversations in the doctor's office. Xero is a company that basically has an application you put on your phone for field techs and field salespeople, like telecom repair or HVAC repair or pharma sales. And when they're out there in the field and talking to the customer, it listens to what they're saying, and then after the call or customer interaction set comes back and goes, okay, at minute 2:45 when the customer complained that their air filter was blah blah blah, that was wrong answer. This is a better answer. And it uploads the conversation to the sales manager and says like, hey, this is I ranked this call as great. Or I rank this call as average, or I rank this call as big problem at 5 when the tech yelled at the customer or whatever. And the thing sells itself because the people all you have to do is a proof of concept, and then 2 weeks later go, okay, the techs that used it ended up having a 40% more ROI on the additional things that were sold, or the visits were that much more quick and ended, resolved quickly than the people who didn't use it. It pays for itself. So those, and like, you're going to give that to all your field tech people. So we love investing in that stuff that A, makes the existing employees better, doesn't just remove them. B, everybody in that market will use it, and C, it's dead simple. You install the app on your phone, you're done.
And it's not like AI has destroyed the idea of investing in a blank for blank. There's still some pattern recognition about, okay, this is like blank, but it's applied to blank. And that, to me, is one way to explain what an application vertical company is. It's like, yeah, I'm going to do something similar to this. I'm doing it for this industry or this vertical, and I'm going to make it really special for that vertical. How do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, again, like, let's look at, let's look at legal. You've got litigation law. In litigation law, during discovery and going through discovery to think about what your arguments are going to be, you have paralegals pouring through documents, and uploading them. And there are multiple companies in the legal space. Harvey is the one that's sort of popularized in the U.S. and has received a ton of funding, but there are several of them. There are a couple in Nova Scotia that are, interestingly, you wouldn't think about that as being a birthplace of legal AI, but it's a great company in Nova Scotia doing this. I wanted to invest in it, but I was like, I don't really want to go to Nova Scotia all the time. So anyway, that was probably a miss. But that are basically that anything that's not encumbered by existing way of doing things is going to be able to remake that industry vertical. And that goes for, think about all the industries where the existing technology is, we talked about this backstage, all the verticals where existing technology is COBOL, banking, airline ticketing, what's that? There's the airline ticketing platform that they all use. All of those things will be reimagined, Gen AI up from the bottom up. It will make the user conversation with buying a ticket from United. I mean, I don't remember, you remember calling United and would like say departure or arrival, and you go departure, and you go, I think you said arrival. Like, and now you'll just be able to call and go, look, I'm flying from Newark to Chicago on Tuesday, and I really want to leave at 10 a.m., not noon. If there's anything less than $500, can you show me those options now?
It's
That's going to happen. That's going to happen like that.
One of the companies I started called Echo Global Logistics is now a $4+ billion logistics company. And the way that we used to get new accounts is you call, and one of the metrics was NBA, new buying accounts. Now what we're actually doing is training AIs on the person's voice. The AI is making calls, and then when the call is warm, you're watching the screen, watching the calls get made, and you're basically picking it up at the exact right time to continue a conversation. Yeah. And I'll give you another example to give you examples. I did not invest
By the way, as the audio models now are also closer and closer to real time, you're just going to be able to have this conversation in real time, and you're not going to be waiting for the thing to process something on the other end.
Here's another one. I just looked at a company that it's a 2-person company that calls with a fully natural voice, calls bars on Sunday and says, hey, are you showing the blah, blah, blah game today? And if the bartender says yes, they report that to the league as copyright infringement. And they send out a bill, and they send the justification with a recorded message to show exactly that bar was actually showing the game. I mean, now, when you think about vertical application companies, part of my argument is this is a new era of human creativity, because now we can think like that's such a clever, that's so clever. Yeah. Like, who thought of that? So
yeah. However, like, again, having run Twitter, and you learn about we didn't think about that. I remember in 2015. So when 2015, there were all these. And I left in the summer of 2015 before the 2016 election. But right when I was getting ready to leave, there were all these like Russian bots and spam accounts being created. And we were like, they seem to be like getting ready to do some weird phishing attack, but we can't figure out what it is because they're just replying to each other instead of like phishing for credentials. Well, of course, what they were doing was like getting ready to like,
election.
Do stuff during the election. But at the time, you're like, this is like, what's going on? So there's just all these unintended consequences. I mean, the unintended consequence of that, of course, is I got a spam text the other day that was like, you didn't pay your toll. And by the way, the phone number is +33. It's a Philippines phone number. Like,
I got the same one.
Yeah, and the URL is like schmucky124.po. Like, that doesn't look like the California DMV. And yet, but obviously it works, because they're doing it, and lots of people are. So imagine now the phone call comes, and it's your mom.
Yeah.
Hey, I got pulled over, and then she's interacting with you in real time. This is the kinds of things that we're just not ready for.
Yeah, from a personal security, relational standpoint, we all have relationships. That's going to change. We all own things. Our relationship to the things is going to change. Yeah. The safety of the things is going to change.
The safety of the things is hugely important.
Yeah.
So I saw, this is true story. So I saw a demo of one of these purely AI live voice interactions that was modeled off, okay, Dick, record, say this in the microphone. Okay, now you're going to come back and have a conversation with yourself. Like, ask anything. And it answered, and I answered. And I asked another question, and I answered. When I was done with that demo, I called my daughter and my son, and we're like, okay, we're going to have a passphrase that only we know.
Same.
And if you get this thing and say I'm in trouble, I'm going to ask you what the passphrase is. You better remember it.
I ironically, without talking about, I did the same thing at dinner 3 weeks ago. We now have a family word.
Yeah. My son, unfortunately, doesn't remember what it is. It's only a couple words already. I'm like, dude. It's not going to be me calling you, okay? So when there's real trouble, so you're going to want to remember the couple words.
We got a handful of minutes left, and I think it'd be fun to go a little deeper about really what's going on and how we think about it for those we love. And I'm curious, how do you talk to your kids and their friends when they say to you, what should I do? Or, well, and you know, the things that I've been learning in blah, blah, blah seem like they don't have value anymore. What do you say to them?
I say to them, and I know it's cliche, but I always say, like, you can't do what you think you're supposed to do next. Like, you know, when I graduated from Michigan with a computer science degree, I was supposed to go into technology and get a job at wherever. And instead, I went to Second City in Chicago and tried to get on. I was like, I'm going to try to get on Saturday Night Live. And I auditioned for SNL twice over the course of the next 8 years, and obviously didn't get on Saturday Night Live. And so went back to technology. But I tell my kids, like, don't do what you think you're supposed to do next, or get the entry-level job you think you're supposed to get next, because then when, particularly in this emergent world, because when the world zigs instead of zags as you expected, you'll end up standing on the stage of your own life, frozen and not knowing what you're supposed to do next. So do whatever you want to do and pursue what you love, and you just have to trust that the story will all make sense looking backward over your shoulder instead of like, I got to go do this. I mean, think of all the people right now who went to college and were like, okay, now I got to go to business school and study like accounting, and then I'm going to get a job in a big six firm, and then become a partner. Well, like those entry-level accounting jobs, as I hope have made clear, are going away, like super quick. So that's just not a way to live your life. And I tell them the way you build resilience is doing what you want to do, and then when things go wrong, as they inevitably will, you'll be able to roll with the punches.
I think those are beautiful messages, and I add to that the idea of what I say to my daughters is, how can you touch another human life? I don't care how we play out this age of AI, we're still human. And so there's a humanity that is. And one idea of how to respond, react, or plan relative to AI is what's human, and how do you participate in that human journey.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's going to be more and more and more important. Again, when you think about social media as having destroyed a bit of that, it's going to be even more important now.
I'll ask two last questions to you, and then we can wrap it up. One is, if there's one book right now that all of us need to read, what is that book?
On AI or anything?
Anything.
Oh, my favorite book is The Places in Between. It's a guy who basically, when the Taliban are taken down after 9/11, he decides, I'm going to complete my journey across the old, spice route, and I wasn't able to get through Afghanistan, so I'm going to go through Afghanistan by myself. And it's just this incredible story of, like, first of all, talk about Dan Gilbert yesterday reimagining Detroit himself and then doing it. And you think about, okay, one guy can't cross the entire country of Afghanistan during a war with between the West and these Islamic fundamentalists. He's going to never make it. And it's an amazing story about history and one man's resilience and creativity and just like the will to complete something and a journey that you wanted to complete. And he does it. And then you're like, you read this book and then you hear people go like, Uber surge pricing is bullshit. And you're like, man, your problems are trivial. If this guy can do this, there's a lot more out there to go do.
Yeah. It's a perfect tee up for the last question, which is, you've lived an extraordinary life. I see your life as a life of true, active curiosity. You were curious enough to do what very few others were doing. You stopped the typical post-graduation path, and you said, I want to do improv. I'm going for it. And you were living off dollars, not tens or 20s, and you went for it. And then you had another journey that led you leading an iconic company on Earth, a globally iconic company, and it can keep going on. And I'm just curious, when you think about what's the purpose of all of this, what's the meaning of being alive from the eyes of Dick Costolo?
I have the simplest answer to that, which is just it may sound sort of trite, but I always think about what's the thing that's going to allow me to be present the most. And that's what that's what I should be doing. And I got to the point of Twitter in 2015 where I was like, I just like constantly, I'm never present. I'm constantly thinking about what I'm gonna do about this, what am I gonna do about that, you know. I gotta go on and do something where I can be present more. And that's what there is, and that's when you're the happiest. When you're present, you're the happiest. You know, when you're laughing, you're not thinking about, you know, the horrible conversation you have to have at work tomorrow. So that's how I try to live my life, and you know, and when I'm not in that space, I try to get to that space.
It's beautiful. Thank you.